I always encourage parents to participate as much as they can. Because the reality is, if I'm only seeing and playing with their kid for 45 minutes out of a whole week, I'm not really doing much.
It's a snapshot.
Yeah. And so they can work on this task for 45 minutes for one week, and it could help, right? But it's not as helpful as if they were doing it at home more often.
Welcome back to another episode of Therapy Unmasked. Today is a really awesome episode because we have one of my favorite people at Ability Innovations with us, and that is Angela.
Hi, Angela.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And for those of you who don't know who Angela is, she has the awesome job of being the clinic director of our Ogden clinic. And some of you might know, but we recently opened a big new location down in Ogden.
Like doubled the size of the clinic, and we probably doubled the size of what Angela's responsible for.
Right. How do you feel about that?
That's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing. Yeah, I'm learning a lot. So it's definitely like a process to learn all of this stuff because I'm relatively new to the managerial world. I love the fact that we're growing and I have all of these opportunities to learn. So it's great. And it's a great team up there. So
yeah,
awesome.
They're pretty awesome up there.
Yeah.
It is so cool to see Ogden grow like it has, because we were just in like that small building, and now it's like you said, it's 2 times as big, and there's just so much we can do there. So it is an exciting thing that's happening right now. So Angela, I do want to ask you though, before we get into your responsibilities as a clinic director and kind of what you do with occupational therapy, why did you choose to go into pediatric therapy? What was the thought process behind that?
Well, so occupational therapy is my second career. I was an engineer coming out of college, and engineering was a great career path for me at the time. And I just got to a point where I felt like I wanted to help more people directly and kind of wanted to do more just like kind of one-on-one people work and feel a little bit more fulfilled than I was feeling at my previous role. I found occupational therapy. I had a couple of friends who were occupational therapists working in the schools, and they really loved their jobs. And I was like, well, I would love to work a job that I love every day, that makes me feel fulfilled, that also lets me problem solve at the same time and kind of use some of those like problem solving technical skills along with developing my people skills and knowledge of just how people and life and things work. I felt like too, as I was getting older, that I wanted the skills to help me help others in my life. So occupational therapy, you learn how to help everybody across the entire lifespan on just how to live your life, right? How to do things in your everyday life, how babies develop, how to play with them to help them develop to the best of their potential. When you get injured, you know how the techniques for how to get dressed effectively when your arm is broken, or when you get injured more seriously, how to really face your life in a more positive and going forward kind of mindset. And so I really wanted something like that to help me support my life as it continued on,
Well,
So.
At what point, like when you were thinking about all these things and you go into school, at what point did you go, oh yeah, this is what I was looking for? Did that happen right away, or was that in school? Or
So that's a story that I like to tell a lot. I have a really good story for that. When I was working as an engineer, they gathered us into this big conference room and showed us this awesome video of this guy who was 3D printing prosthetics for children in Africa who had lost limbs due to landmines. And they were powered by computers and processors that my company was manufacturing at the time. And so they were like, you are working at this company and you are facilitating this awesome thing of happening. And I was like, that's great and all, but I kind of want to be that guy. And then when I went to OT school, in my assistive technology class, they showed us the exact same video of the guy who was 3D printing limbs for kids in Africa. And they said, you get to be this guy. And I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly where I wanted it to be.
That is so, it was the same video.
It was the exact same video.
So funny.
Yeah.
I love that.
You actually came full circle.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I
That's
enjoyed
pretty
that a
cool.
lot.
And you're from Ohio, right?
Yes.
What is that where you were going to school or?
Yeah, I went to school at Ohio State. Go Bucks. Or I guess the Ohio State. But I moved out to Phoenix and got my first job in Phoenix and lived there for like 7-8 years. And then bopped around to Southern California, followed my husband to his fancy pants new job. And then I went to OT school in San Diego.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And then I came up here for my fieldwork. So
you really have been everywhere.
Feels
jumped
like
around everywhere. So that's cool.
Yeah. So it's always an interesting question when people ask me where I'm from.
Did you have an emo phase in Ohio?
No, but I did listen to the Hawthorne Heights song a lot.
Yeah, everyone from Ohio has an emo phase, I feel like. That's funny. You chose the path of pediatric occupational therapy. You had this job as a engineer, and I'm assuming you were making computer chips, or was that
I was
kind of
in manufacturing.
Okay, you were in the manufacturing. And so you just kind of wanted to do more. So you went on to do that. So how did you end up with Ability Innovations?
Yeah, so I actually came here for my level 2 field work, my first one. And I really loved it here. It was like, just like my first ability to be hands-on. Coming from California, there's like a lot of pediatric clinics everywhere. So I did a lot of my like school shadowing observation hours in pediatric clinics and kind of decided at that time, I was like, I think I really want to work in pediatrics. So I was really glad to have the placement here. It was just so much fun. It was so much fun working with the kids, getting to learn with them, getting to basically be a kid again. And so that was great. And then I went to a couple of like Ability Innovations has a lot of these game nights and a lot of just evening get-together times for the staff to feel like family. So I went to a couple of those and it just felt like, this was kind of like the small company feel to make me feel like a person in the company, like a valued person in the company. And after coming from like a large corporation where it's pretty typical to just kind of feel like a number, coming to like a small family-owned business where you actually are an individual and are treated as like an individual was a really nice feeling. So I was like, I really want to work for Nick and Sarah. And I was really hoping I would get a job here after I graduated. So I was really lucky to have that. Yeah.
And I remember you were with me a lot, right? We did a lot of stuff. And I never saw the bottom half of your face because it was during COVID. So everybody was wearing masks. And then after you came back and I actually got to see the bottom half of your face, I was like, now I get to know the real Angela, not masked up.
Not the masked Angela.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So it's kind of we relate everything back to superheroes, but it's kind of you pull your mask off, we get to know the real you, but you also still have your superpower. It's in there. So it's cool.
Cool. So did you start here at the Layton location or did you always work at the Ogden location? What was kind of your...
I did my field work at the Layton location, but since joining on as a staff member and as a therapist, I've always been at the Ogden location.
Okay, cool. And so do you want to walk us through what your role as a clinic director is and how does that affect you being a therapist? Kind of take us down that path a little bit.
Well, clinic director duties, I'm basically responsible for the building and kind of the everyday workings of the building. So things that need to get purchased, I purchase those. I manage general inventory. So even though I don't count everything, office staff does, and they tell me, and I make sure that everything is stocked. So kind of the not fun side of things, right? Making sure we have enough toilet paper, paper towels, soap, sanitizer, things like that. There's also just kind of general people management, right? So even though this isn't management where I am responsible for everybody's work output or anything like that, I am responsible for how we're all working together as a team, making sure that everybody is feeling heard as an employee and satisfied as an employee. So I'm basically HR as well. So listen to complaints, manage any conflicts that arise. Also, I'm the cheerleader, right, for the company too, of just everyone's doing a great job. Here's how we can celebrate. I bring everybody's input into that. And then I'm also like, part of the admin team as well. So bringing things down from Nick's level of decision making, right? And kind of like where he wants to see the company go is where I am also trying to move the company along. Yeah.
But also the other way, right? Too. Like bringing stuff up to admin meetings and saying, hey, my team wants to know about this. And
And on top of all that, you have a caseload too of kids that you're seeing. So is that pretty hard to balance all that stuff, or?
It's tricky to balance. I will say though that I really, really love being a therapist. And so for how stressful the clinic director role is, although I will say that it's like really not as stressful as my previous job was. So I'm still like really, really grateful and thankful for that. Getting to see kids every day that I'm in is a great stress reliever, right? It brings me a lot of joy, makes me really happy. I get to end the day kind of on a good note. So
what would you say are some of the highlights of being an occupational therapist? Do you have any experiences that have really stuck out to you?
Just like getting to see the variety of the types of people there are, getting to exercise my brain and to help other people achieve their goals. And, even the tiny little steps along the way is just really, really fulfilling. Kids are really funny. So they, some of the shade they throw at me can be really funny sometimes. Of course, I have to take it seriously in the moment, but, afterwards I'm like, this was the greatest insult I have ever received. And I get to learn a lot from them. A lot of them come in and like the first thing they tell me is just like, I'm learning about volcanoes today. Did you know that? This little tidbit of information. And it's just great to kind of be a part of that curiosity with them. So I really just enjoy every moment.
Occupational therapy covers a lot, right? You have fine motor skills, you have emotional regulation, you have sensory. So could you walk us through, like, say a parent brings their child in for an evaluation, how would you go about determining what kind of care this child needs?
First off, I always start with a parent interview. And as I'm interviewing the parent, the kiddo is usually kind of playing around the gym. So I'm kind of like in my peripheral vision, kind of looking at what kind of play the kiddo is doing, right? Are they bopping from activity to activity? Are they focusing on more of like the tabletop, like fine motor things? Are they, just kind of like seeing what kind of activities they're drawn to and how they're generally playing, even though I'm not specifically looking at them. And during that parent interview is where I get my directional start, because usually the parent will come in and be like,
I've got these things
that I'm worried about and that I want you to look into, right? And so, we've had like a lot of times it is emotional regulation, because that's like really like surface level behaviors that people generally see, right? Taking a look at some of that stuff and like what that looks like when they get angry, or like what kind of things are triggering them to be angry, and what they do to help their kiddo calm down when they're upset, things like that, gives us like a lot of clues as to where to kind of go from there. My observation about their like behavior as they're moving around the gym, as they're playing, also kind of clues into some of that stuff. So if I'm seeing a lot of like, kiddo has a lot of difficulty with emotional regulation, and they end up like, getting like having like extreme angry outbursts, or they're like throwing themselves on the floor. And then I also see them kind of like jumping off of things, crashing into things, swinging and things like that. And then I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is like definitely a sensory thing I need to look at, right? I tend to look at sensory for most of my kiddos, because that's kind of where the base of things start.
Yeah, it's such a developmental piece of almost all kids.
Yeah. And so then most of my families, I give them like our sensory profile assessment. And that's not like a diagnosis of any sort. It just kind of helps us understand like, okay, like, do they have like sensory needs that are a little bit more or diminished in some areas, so that like it's impacting certain behaviors, right? It's impacting how they're responding to certain things in their environment that then show up as behaviors and things like that, depending on what like the parents are concerned with, right? Like I will look at a lot of like gross motor skill as well. So like how well can they do like, how well can they cross midline and coordinate both of their limbs at the same time on certain things? How well can they sit down and focus on an activity and like remember things? So if I like give them a task of like, hey, let's write down 3 things we're going to hide in a scavenger hunt, and then let's remember what those things are and go look for them. How well can they do that? So that like, takes a look at their executive functioning skills and their handwriting skills at the same time, and their ability to interact with me all at the same time. So I don't know if I necessarily do things in like a certain linear order of any sort, but I try to just come up with like 1 or 2 kind of like bigger activities that I can kind of look at multiple aspects with and see how they do. And then if I'm seeing like, okay, like some more like fine motor things, then maybe I can give them like an extra fine motor task, extra visual motor task that's like kind of specifically looking at that. Like stringing blocks is always a really good one to look at that stuff with, right? Or like drawing me a picture of something. In addition to that, I can also kind of dig deeper.
And I think you're hitting on something that's really interesting in occupational therapy, because we have like these activities that we choose and it looks like, oh, we're just sitting around drawing pictures with kids. But like you're saying, you're looking at so many different skill areas in just one activity. The parents might look at it and go like, I don't get it. Like, how is this an evaluation? She just sat down and drew a picture with my kid. But you just named off like there's all these cognitive and brain skills. There's like perception and visual motor. There's fine motor skills. There's like all these problem solving things and executive functioning. There's so many different skill areas. And you can kind of piece all of that information together in just like a few little activities. It's amazing, right?
I feel like that's the fun part about OT too. Of just like you get to look at it all in one big picture, and then you can like tease out some of the details from it.
And they kind of teach us that in school, to like break things down into parts and then see these different parts when you're seeing this bigger picture of like an activity, to break it down in your mind and go, okay, we need to look at this and we need to look at this. And it's kind of a cool ability that we build as we're getting training as occupational therapy practitioners. It's cool. And then how do you explain all of that to parents? Like, this is what I'm seeing. How do you explain that to them?
Kind of exactly like how I explained it to you guys. So kind of like explain the activity that I had them do, tell them what it is that I saw. Depending on the time frame I'm doing it, there's like sometimes like parents want to know at the end of the session what I saw, right? And I always have to give a disclaimer, because at that point, like I haven't quite put everything together yet, right? And so I can't say like, for sure, this is like exactly what it means, but I can definitely tell them what I saw and that what maybe I think it means, but then kind of tell them like, I still am going to put it together with like, this other assessment that you completed, this other assessment that we did during the session to give me a little bit more like detailed response to some of that stuff. But I can like, at the end of the session be like, yeah, I saw that, they had a really tough time like doing this move, which is a lot of bilateral coordination, crossing midline, things like that. But they had like no problem doing like this move kind of thing, and what that means, and just kind of give them a couple like quick activities that like, that they'll see me working on and that they can try to work on at home, just to give them kind of a look into what it is that we'll be doing.
Generalize a little bit,
Do you encourage the parents to come and watch the session, or do you prefer them to kind of stand off a little bit?
I always encourage parents to participate as much as they can, because the reality is if I'm only seeing and playing with their kid for 45 minutes out of a whole week, I'm not really doing much.
It's a snapshot.
Yeah. And so they can like, work on this task for 45 minutes for one week, and it could help, right? But it's not as helpful as if they were doing it at home more often. So I do try to give homework, but the homework makes more sense if the parents are part of the session actually seeing what it is that we're working on and how we're working on it, than if I were to just explain like, this is how generally we were doing it. This is how he was responding today. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be the response if you try it multiple times across the week, right? So having the parent be a part of the session, I think, is really important. Although I do have a lot of parents that don't really sit like participate in the session. I do have a lot of parents that like sit in and watch though. And so for those parents, I will take the time to kind of explain a lot of things as I'm going along. Yeah.
And we know the reality is not every family can do that. Like maybe they have to bring other little siblings and they have to attend to them and they can't always attend to what you're doing. But I think a lot of parents really try hard to work on those things at home that we talk to them about and stuff like that, because they do realize that, you know, we're not here to fix their kid and we're only seeing them for a snapshot, but we're kind of like guides to those kids and to help those families figure out what direction that they should take with their kids. And you know, some processes take longer. Some family dynamics make it so that it takes longer, and we understand that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of there's a lot of problem solving that occurs in the session, throughout the session as well. So yeah, there's a lot of times too where it's like I'm trying an approach and it just like doesn't work at all for that kiddo, right? And so then the next time I kind of have to go a different direction. And so explaining that to families too is like, you know, like this is what I tried today. Didn't seem like they responded at all, or it didn't seem like it went in the direction that I was hoping it would go. And so then like kind of keeping the families updated of just like, I'm trying some things too, just like, you know, we're all a team, we're trying some things, right? And sometimes we hit a roadblock, sometimes we hit a dead end, and that's not the direction we want to go. So we pick a different direction. So
Angela, as you've been an occupational therapist for a little bit and you have really worked with a bunch of kids, and then you're taking on new responsibilities as a clinic director, what kinds of superpowers did you not know that you had that you're now building?
In my role as an occupational therapist, I feel like, especially when students are around and like, you know, fieldwork students or internship students who come in, I feel like I always kind of like impress myself kind of with like a bit of knowledge of like, oh yeah, like I do know what I'm doing. It does look like I'm playing, but I'm able to explain like all of the little reasons as to why I did what I did and what I'm looking for and things like that. That part has been really fulfilling. And as I'm stretching into this clinic director role, I'm learning more about how I can mesh both my ability to like kind of like trust my gut, right? And to like kind of like see some of that like where it's not super explicitly said, right? But just kind of like see how interactions are, kind of get the general feeling of things, reflect on my general feeling of things, and kind of like take it from a more intuitive stance. And then also like a very explicit, like, what is your direct feedback? Give me like, you know, what it is that you are seeing, the changes you want to see and all that, and kind of mashing it together in a way that hopefully helps my team, right? Makes my team feel like I'm listening to them, that I'm a part of the team, and that I'm also like a person who can be trusted to bring their concerns up to the admin team and then advocate for what it is that we need on our side or like on the team side of things, right? And make it feel like, you know, we're all one big flowy organization.
Yeah. And that's important. I was going to say too, there's another one that's come up as I've talked to other people up in Ogden. They've mentioned that you're so great at leading by example, and that they feel like anytime that you're asking them to do something, you're just right along there with them, doing it with them. You're not just sitting in some like office saying, you guys need to do this, but you're kind of like you're saying, like you're a cheerleader at times, but you're like rallying the troops, getting them to come, like, come on, guys, let's do this together. And I know that lots of people have appreciated that about you. Those are skills and abilities that I think that you're growing, and it's really shining forth. And I would think that those things will make you a stronger occupational therapy practitioner as well, because those skills are inherent in just being a professional too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's that concept of like servant leadership that I feel like people take more to heart as well. Like you're more willing to work for a manager that you see is also willing to work hard for you kind of thing. So yeah, I definitely don't want people to feel like I'm just telling them what to do, because I don't. And I don't want to be telling people what to do. That is not where I want to be. I more want to like ask people for help, right? And kind of make it known that like we're all in this together. We're all in this together. I'm lucky enough I get to be like kind of the head of it and lead us there, but it's not like I'm doing it alone, and it's not like I'm doing it on everybody else's backs.
Yeah.
Like that. So,
and you're right in there with them. Like you've got your own caseload up there in Ogden. You see kids, you understand what they're going through because you're right there with them too. And that's something that I mean, when you watch those shows like Undercover Boss, and the boss goes down and works with the people, and they're like incognito, nobody knows that it's the boss, and those kinds of things. I always think, well, it doesn't work here because we're all like doing stuff together. Like I have my own caseload too, and I work right alongside all of the other therapists too, and even up in Ogden. And I get to see what's going on, at least on a weekly basis. And I'm not so far removed from the people that are working with me or working under me that I don't know what's going on. And it makes it so that, we're working in a place that's still small enough, like we're kind of this mom and pop shop, but at the same time, like we're building something together and we're growing together, and we're offering something that's, in my opinion, something higher for the community than just like a big corporation coming in and setting up shop and then just telling people what to do. And then they try their hardest to do it. But I think it's a little bit different. And that's one of the things that I like about Ability Innovations.
Yeah, building something better and more meaningful for the community, I feel like. So it's good. I wanted to circle back to your role in occupational therapy. So Ability Innovations is like, we pride ourselves on being a very play-based clinic, right? We're all about like progress through play, learning through play, all that different kind of stuff. If you had to pick your top 2 or 3 favorite activities that you do with your caseloads or with kids that you see, what would they be?
oh my gosh, I do so many activities. It's hard because I don't have like set activities that I do with most kids. I just kind of have to tweak what it is that they want to come in playing every day. I feel like my personal favorites are like making slime. That's like an easy one, but I love slime. And I think it's also cool. Like you put all this stuff together and then it's all like liquidy in the beginning and then you stir it and then it all comes together. So I feel like that's really cool. Yeah. I feel like the games that I use a lot that I feel like challenges a lot of like different skill sets, different skills, are games that happen on the swing. So a lot of the times, like I will do like this type of game where like you have to transfer these things from over here to over here. And there's like a rule for how they have to do it while they're swinging, right? And so a lot of times, like if they're doing it by themselves, like they're working on like their visual motor skills, their gross motor skills, motor planning skills, right? They're getting vestibular input, proprioceptive input. They are, kind of like, and I'll make it harder or easier for a lot of kiddos, right? But that usually involve like a lot of kiddos like really find those activities engaging, a lot of fun. And I have fun through those activities too, right? Because I get to like help them through it. But I also can see like what it is that they come up with. A lot of kids will like find loopholes in my rules a lot of the times too, right? And so that's just how smart they are, right. That they can kind of like, I have a rule and they're like, oh, but you didn't say this. And so I'm like, you're right, I didn't say that, so you can go ahead and do it, right? I feel like that activity also helps when we get a lot of siblings that are in or peers that are in. And so then I change those rules up a little bit where I'm like, okay, well, like only you have like, to grab this pile over here, like you guys have to take turns, but the other person has to be the one to put the object over on that side. So then it brings in a lot of like team problem solving, social skills at that point, right? And making sure you can like manage and control your body so as to not affect the other person and their body in the same little tiny space, but they get to have fun with it at the same time and it doesn't feel like work at the same time. So
that's cool.
And hopefully a parent would watch all that and go like, oh, we could do this at home. Maybe if they have a swing.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to do it on a swing, but that I feel like is one of the things that makes like the going to an OT clinic really special, right? It's like not everybody has a swing in the middle of their living room, but our OT clinic has a swing in the middle of the space, so we might as well use it, right? And it's also like a really great tool to use for OT purposes. But it can just be like, you know, you're doing a bear crawl on the floor to get things from point A to point B, or both are figuring out how to slide on like a towel along like a wood floor or something like that. It can be modified a lot pretty easily, I think, for home too, where they might not have a sling.
Yeah, I've watched you guys work, like all the therapists here, and the way that you guys can adapt for each case is so impressive. It really is a super cool thing. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here. My last question, though, is if there was a parent out there that was considering getting an evaluation for their kid, what would you say to them? And why would Ability Innovations maybe be a good option for them to look at?
I feel like it never hurts to get an evaluation, especially for occupational therapy, right? We're here to help. We're here to provide additional information. And so like, even if you're questioning, like we have, you know, if the parent requests a consultation, right, we can come in and kind of chat with them informally about some of their concerns to see if an occupational therapy evaluation is the direction that they should go. We're trained on developmental milestones and pediatric development. And so we can kind of help them gauge like, okay, like, you know, that kind of response is pretty typical of a kiddo this age, or, you know, by this age, typically like what we kind of see is this and that, but it's also really independent on the kid and like really dependent on the individual kiddo, their individual environment, their individual, like just everything about what their life is like, right? And so we can kind of talk to them about that stuff. But I feel like Ability Innovations is a great place to get started because we're really strength-based on that. So we're not going to come in and tell you like there's definitely something wrong with your kid and you should get them help kind of thing, right? We word things so that like that we're not meaning like we don't want them to feel anybody to feel bad as they come in to try to just learn and help their kids, right? And so coming in, we're going to look at it and be like, yeah, like maybe some of these skills are decreased and can impact some of that stuff, but here's also all of these other things that they're capable of doing, right? And highlighting all of that stuff as well. And then, you know, we're a place to kind of help those things that maybe need a little bit more help. But we also understand that like development is like every kiddo develops on their own pace and they're going to develop, right? And so what we're here to do is kind of help some of those things that maybe developing not as quickly, not as on path as some people want, and to kind of help bump that along so that it can eventually meet up to where, you know, either they need to be with their family, where their family wants them to be, where society wants them to be, whatever you have it, things like that. So I think if we, keep that mindset of like, we're here to help you, and we're here to support you, right? Whether that is like in the long term or in the short term, or just to give you some information. We can always give general information. We can give referrals to like other things that we might see that maybe occupational therapy is not the right fit, but we can also see like, you know, this is more in the realm of what a speech therapist can work on. And so we can refer in that direction, or in the realm of what like, you know, even like behavioral therapies or mental health therapies or myofunctional therapies, things like that maybe not fully within OT can help, but we can definitely see where other professions can also help and provide them support in that sense as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I mean, it all circles back to your kind of story with joining their occupational therapy in the first place. You want to be there to help them. You want to be on the front lines handing out the prosthetics, So that's so cool. Well, Angela, do you have anything else you want to share with any parents out there before we let you go?
Come check us out.
Perfect. Sweet. Do you have any other questions, Nick?
No, we're so grateful to have Angela. Like, she really adds so much to the team, and we thank you for being on the podcast with us today. And if you want to check out more of what Angela does and the team up there in Ogden and see all of the resources and things that they have, come check it out.
Yeah, for sure. It's a brand new location. Like Nick said, double the size, double the work for Angela too. But it's great. It's growing and it's so cool up there. They've really done a nice job.
There's lots of space to move around.
You're right. Right. All righty. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up today's episode. Thank you for joining us for Therapy Unmasked. As always, Therapy Unmasked is brought to you by Ability Innovations. Go to our website, www.abilityinnovations.com. There's tons of free resources on there. We have articles, blogs, podcast episodes. We have courses, and we're even offering summer camps this summer for kids with very specific needs, and they can learn those in group settings. And all of it is, some of it's paid, a lot of it is free. So feel free to check it out and see what's right for you and your family. Nick started this company to be a resource for parents in Utah because there really isn't a lot of places out there that kind of do what we do. And so we're just trying to fulfill that need for the community here.
Give us a call or come in and check out what we have to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Other than that, we'll see you in the next episode of Therapy Unmasked. Bye.